Have you ever imagined what it would be like if the world was plunged into darkness for 3 days straight? No light, no electricity, no communication, nothing that could illuminate the darkness. What if, on top of that, you had to face the horrors that lurk in the shadows, like demons, monsters, plagues, and fire from the sky? Sounds like a nightmare, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this could happen soon, and that it is predicted in an ancient prophecy that has been passed down for centuries by various saints and mystics of the Catholic Church? Do you believe? Would you be prepared? In this video, we will reveal everything you need to know about the 3 days of darkness, the prophecy that could change the world. Stay tuned, because what you see next may be your only chance to survive humanity's greatest challenge. The prophecy of the 3 days of darkness is a supernatural revelation that would have been granted by God to some of His chosen ones to warn humanity about an approaching divine punishment as a consequence of the sins and apostasy of the world. According to prophecy, before the second coming of Christ and the beginning of a new era of peace and justice, the world will go through a great tribulation that will culminate in 3 days and 3 nights of total darkness, during which most of the population will be destroyed, exterminated by evil forces and natural cataclysms. Only the faithful who repent of their sins will be able to escape God's wrath and see the light again. The prophecy of 3 days of darkness is not a modern invention, but rather a tradition that dates back to the first centuries of Christianity. Some of the first testimonies that mention it are the writings of the fathers of the Church, such as St. Jerome, St. John Chrysostom, St. Gregory the Great, and St. Bede, who interpreted some biblical passages, such as the book of Exodus, the book of Revelation, and the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, as references to the 3 days of darkness. For example, in Matthew 24:29, Jesus says, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the forces of the sky will be shaken." In Mark 13:24-25, he repeats, "In those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will be falling from the sky, and the forces that are in the sky will be shaken." And in Luke 21:25, 26, he adds, "There will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars. On earth, the anguish and perplexity of the nations at the roaring and tossing of the sea. Men will faint from terror and from the expectation of the things that will come upon the world, for the forces of the heavens will be shaken." These words of Jesus were understood by many saints and theologians as a prophecy of the 3 days of darkness that preceded His glorious return. Throughout history, several mystics and seers claim to have received visions and messages about the 3 days of darkness, confirming and detailing the prophecy. Among them, we can mention St. Hildegard of Bingen, 11th century, St. Vincent Ferrer, 10th century, St. Catherine of Siena, 10th century, St. Gaspar of Buffalo, 19th century, Blessed Anna Maria Taigi, 19th century, Blessed Elizabeth Canori, Mora, 19th century, Blessed Elizabeth Canori, Mora, Nora, 19th century, Pietrelcina, 20th century, and French mystic Marie-Julie Jahenny, 20th century. These testimonies, although not considered dogmas of faith by the Catholic Church, are worthy of respect and attention, as they come from virtuous, pious people and recognized for their holiness. Furthermore, they harmonize with the Scriptures and the tradition of the Church, which has always taught that God is merciful but also just, and that He punishes sinners and rewards the righteous. Therefore, we cannot ignore or despise the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness, but rather prepare for it, with prayer, penance, and trust in God. But when will it happen? What are the signs that precede it, and what to do to survive? This is what we will see in the next blocks: signs and dates. How do we know if the 3 days of darkness are about to happen? What are the signs we should look out for, and when will they occur? These are questions that many ask themselves and that do not have an easy or definitive answer. After all, the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness is a mystery of God that only He fully knows. However, some of the seers who received the prophecy gave some clues and indications about the signs and dates preceding the great event. Let's see some of them. One of the most cited signs is that of the great war that will involve the entire world and will be the most terrible and bloody in history. This war would be the beginning of the Great Tribulation and would be provoked by a worldwide revolution against the church, religion, and social order. In this war, there would be persecutions, massacres, apostasies, heresies, blasphemies, sacrileges, impiety, and abominations that would seriously offend God and His law. This war would also be marked by the invasion of Europe by a Muslim army led by an Antichrist who would oppose to Christ and His church. This Antichrist would be a false prophet who would deceive many with his miracles and wonders and who would demand worship and the mark of the beast in exchange for peace and prosperity. This war would last about 3.5 years and would end with the victory of the faithful over the Antichrist and his allies, with the help of the angels who would descend from heaven to fight. So that you can understand more clearly and quickly the signs that surround us in challenging times like the ones we are living in, it is essential to be aware of the prophecies that are being fulfilled. Many still don't realize the magnitude of what is happening around us, and that's why I decided to offer something special to all channel subscribers. An exclusive digital ebook titled The Secret Behind the Holy Bible. This book is an unmissable opportunity to access impactful revelations about biblical prophecies that will open your eyes to current reality. Don't let this unique chance pass you by. The knowledge contained in this ebook could change the way you see events around you. The process to get your gift is quick and simple. Just click on the link available in the first pinned comment to download it immediately. Another important sign is that of the Great Cross, which will appear in the sky and will be seen by all the inhabitants of earth. This cross would be a sign of hope for the righteous and a sign of terror for the wicked. This cross would announce the arrival of the 3 days of darkness and would be accompanied by heavenly voices that would warn humanity about what is to come. This cross would remain in the sky for 7 days and then disappear. A third sign is that of the great earthquake, which will shake the entire world and cause much damage and deaths. This earthquake would be the beginning of the 3 days of darkness and would be followed by a great silence that would envelop the earth. This earthquake would also be the signal to light the holy candles, which would be the only source of light during the 3 days of darkness. These candles would have the power to ward off demons and protect the faithful. They were to be lit before sunset on the day of the earthquake and were not to be turned off until dawn on the 4th day. A fourth sign is that of the great miracle, which will happen at the end of the 3 days of darkness and which will be the manifestation of Christ in all His glory and majesty. This miracle would be the resurrection of the righteous who died during the tribulation and the transformation of the living who survived the 3 days of darkness. These righteous people would receive glorious bodies and supernatural gifts and would be caught up to heaven, where they would see the face of God and participate in the feast of the elect. This miracle would also be the purification of the earth and the renewal of creation, which would be free from sin and death and would receive new beauty and harmony. This miracle would mark the beginning of Christ's kingdom on earth, which would last 1,000 years and be characterized by peace, justice, love, and holiness. These are some of the signs and dates that the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness reveals to us. But are they already happening? Are we living in the end times? Are the 3 days of darkness near? This is what we will analyze in the next block. Analysis of current signals. After knowing the signs and dates that precede the 3 days of darkness, the question arises, are they already being fulfilled? Are we living in the end times? Are the 3 days of darkness near? To answer these questions, we need to look at the world we live in and see if it fits the description of the prophecy. Let's analyze some points. The first point is that of the Great War, which would involve the entire world and which would be provoked by a worldwide revolution against the church, religion, and social order. Is this already happening? Well, if we look at the current situation, we can see that there are many conflicts and tensions between nations that can escalate into a global war at any moment. Some examples are the nuclear crisis between the United States and North Korea, the civil war in Syria and Iraq, the terrorist threat from the Islamic State and other radical groups, the territorial dispute between China and its neighbors, political instability in Venezuela and other Latin American countries, the migration crisis in Europe and the Middle East, and the economic rivalry between the great world powers. Furthermore, we can see that there is a growing hostility against the church, religion, and social order on the part of movements that promote atheism, materialism, feminism, abortion, homosexuality, gender ideology, communism, socialism, globalism, and other ideologies and practices contrary to natural law and divine law. These movements seek to destroy the Christian values that sustain Western civilization and impose a new world order based on rebellion against God and the slavery of man. These movements are also responsible for persecutions, massacres, apostasies, heresies, blasphemies, sacrileges, impiety, and abominations that seriously offend God and His church and that call for revenge from heaven. Therefore, we can conclude that the sign of the Great War is already being fulfilled and that we are experiencing the Great Tribulation announced by the prophecy. The second point is the invasion of Europe by a Muslim army led by an Antichrist who would oppose Christ and His church. Is this already happening? Well, if we look at the current situation, we can see that there is a silent invasion of Europe by millions of Muslim immigrants who arrive on the continent via different routes, fleeing war, poverty, or persecution in their countries of origin. These immigrants, for the most part, do not integrate into European culture and society, but rather form ghettos and enclaves where they practice their religion and law without respecting local laws and customs. Some of them even engage in acts of violence, terrorism, vandalism, rape, pedophilia, and other criminal activities that generate fear, hatred, anger, and division among Europeans. These immigrants are also manipulated by political, religious, and economic leaders who use them as instruments to destabilize and conquer Europe and to implement a globalist agenda aimed at destroying the continent's Christian identity. These leaders, in turn, could be precursors or collaborators of the Antichrist, who would be the supreme leader of this Muslim invasion and who would present himself as the Messiah expected by Muslims, the Mahdi. This Antichrist, according to the prophecy, would be a false prophet who would deceive many with his miracles and wonders and who would demand worship and the mark of the beast in exchange for peace and prosperity. This Antichrist would also be the mortal enemy of Christ and His church and would try to exterminate all who opposed Him. Therefore, we can conclude that the sign of the invasion of Europe is already being fulfilled and that we are facing the imminent appearance of the Antichrist. The third point is that of the great cross that would appear in the sky and that would be seen by all the inhabitants of earth. Has this already happened? Well, if we look at the current situation, we can see that there are some astronomical phenomena that can be interpreted as preludes or symbols of the Great Cross. Some examples are the total solar eclipse that occurred on August 21, 2017, and was seen by millions of people in the United States and other countries. The planetary alignment that occurred on September 23, 2017, and which was considered by some to be the reproduction of John's vision in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, where he says, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman dressed as the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and screamed in pain as she was about to give birth. The comet that was seen in July 2020 and was the brightest in the last 23 years, and the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, which occurred on December 21, 2020, and was the closest in the last 800 years. These phenomena, although they are not the Great Cross itself, may be signs that it is close to appearing and that we should keep an eye on the sky. Furthermore, we can see that there are some testimonies from people who claim to have seen or heard the Great Cross or the heavenly voices that accompany it. These testimonies, although not official or proven, may be indications that God is communicating with some of His chosen ones and that He is preparing us for the great event. Therefore, we can conclude that the sign of the Great Cross has not yet been fulfilled, but it is very close to being fulfilled, and we must prepare for it. The fourth point is that of the great earthquake, which will shake the entire world and cause a lot of damage and deaths. Has this already happened? Well, if we look at the current situation, we can see that there are many earthquakes occurring in various parts of the world, some of them of great magnitude and with devastating consequences. Some recent examples are the 6.0 magnitude earthquake that hit China on September 15, 2021, and affected more than 100,000 people, and the 7.5 magnitude earthquake that hit the Alaska region in 2020. These earthquakes, although they have not yet caused the prophesied darkness, may be signs that the great earthquake is about to occur. Therefore, we can conclude that the signal of the great earthquake has not yet been fulfilled, but it is very close to being fulfilled, and we must protect ourselves. The fifth point is that of the great miracle, which would happen at the end of the 3 days of darkness, and which would be the manifestation of Christ in all His glory and majesty. Has this already happened? Well, if we look at the current situation, we can see that there is hope and anxiety on the part of the faithful who await the coming of Christ with faith and love, and who strive to live and witness His gospel. These believers, for the most part, are few and persecuted, but they are strong and courageous and do not allow themselves to be shaken by the trials and temptations of the world. These believers are also blessed by God, who grants them graces and miracles that confirm His presence and His promise. These believers are still guided by the Holy Spirit, who inspires them with prayers and actions that contribute to the salvation of souls and the glorification of God. These are some of the points that we can analyze to see whether the signs of the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness are being fulfilled or not. But as we have already said, prophecy is a mystery of God, which only He fully knows. Therefore, we cannot say or deny with certainty when or how it will happen. What we can do is watch and pray, as Jesus taught us, and trust in His will and His mercy, recommendations for survival. These recommendations are based on the testimonies of mystics and seers who received the prophecy and who left us some advice and guidance to face this great challenge. Let's see what they are. 1. Blessed candles. The first recommendation is to have blessed candles at home and light them before sunset on the day of the big earthquake. Do not extinguish them until dawn on the 4th day. These candles would be the only source of light during the 3 days of darkness and would have the power to ward off demons and protect the faithful. These candles should be kept in a safe and secret place and used only for this purpose. They must be enough to illuminate the entire house and distribute it among family members. 2. Close doors and windows. The second recommendation is to close the doors and windows of the house and not look outside during the 3 days of darkness. This would be to avoid seeing the horrors that lurk in the shadows, such as demons, monsters, plagues, and fire from heaven that would try to deceive people. It would also be to avoid being contaminated by the pestilential air that would invade the atmosphere, causing illnesses and deaths. Doors and windows should be sealed with salt and holy water and covered with dark cloths or thick curtains. They should only be opened on the 4th day, when the sunlight shines again, and the voice of Christ is heard announcing the end of the 3 days of darkness. 3. Pray and meditate. The third recommendation is to pray and meditate during the 3 days of darkness without being distracted by anything that could disturb communion with God. This would be to strengthen the faith, hope, and charity of the faithful, and to ask for God's mercy, forgiveness, and protection. Prayers and meditations should be shared with family, friends, and neighbors who are in the same house, and extended to brothers and sisters who are in other houses. 4. Food and water. The fourth recommendation is to have food and water at home and consume them in moderation and caution during the 3 days of darkness. This would be to maintain the health, strength, and endurance of the faithful, and to avoid hunger, thirst, and weakness. Food and water must be natural, simple, and healthy, free from contamination, and sufficient to feed the whole family. 5. Confidence and joy in the heart. The fifth and final recommendation is to maintain confidence and joy in the heart, and not be afraid or sad during the 3 days of darkness. This would be to show confidence in the promise of God, who told us, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you, and I will sustain you with my faithful right hand." It would also be to show joy in the hope of God, who told us, "I you these things so that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be in you, and your joy may be complete." John 15:11.